Good morning. Happy Thursday to everyone. Thank you for joining us today virtually for the highly anticipated sequel to our Section 8 annual rent adjustments. My name is Jacqueline Rathbun, and I serve KHRC as the Director of Contract Administration. The webinar you are about to attend is part 2 of Section 8's annual rent adjustments presented by KHRC's lead PBCA Finance Officer, Sara Hall. As you guys know, we have a team of 4 PBCA finance officers that handle all of the HUD finance related tasks for you, and those other team members are on with us today. They are Wasini Hicks, Liz Gouge, and Cole Percival. And similar to our other trainings that we have had, there will be training certificates emailed out to all active registrants upon the completion of the class. These certificates go out within a couple of days and are automatically generated by GoToWebinar. So there's our contact information at the end of the webinar if you have any questions and you didn't receive your certificate. As you're aware, we have muted all attendee mics and have turned off all your cameras to limit distractions during Sara's presentation. But we have tested the sound and the visuals on our end. So if you cannot hear or see us, please check with your IT, check your computer settings, speakers, things like that. We encourage questions. We expect to get a lot during this presentation. So if you have them, make sure you have your questions feature control panel up. And there'll be several spots within the presentation and at the very end for Sara and the team and I to answer any questions that you have. So feel free to pop those questions in the question box, and if I don't reply to them right away, we'll probably answer those live during one of those designated question answer spots. We are not providing any handouts for this training this time because the rent schedule and the OCAF certification letter are very specific to your property. So that is why we shared our screen early and gave you a couple minutes to collect your current rent schedule and your last rent adjustment, the last OCAF certification from your last rent adjustment to refer to while we're going through the PowerPoint. Just a note, a quick place to locate those is in your PBCA Procorem Work Center if you don't have that readily available. All your previous rent adjustments are kept on those for your reference. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. Sara has a lot of great information to go over with all of you, so I am going to turn it over to her. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. My sound is on, right? You can hear me? Making sure.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I couldn't see my control panel. Okay, wonderful. Let's see. There we go. Welcome back, as Jackie said. So we're excited to finish this training series off. So part 2 of annual rent adjustments. We'll do a little bit of recap from last month for those of you that weren't able to join. And if you weren't able to join, that webinar is available as a recording for you to view. So reach out if you need to find out where that is. Some general information about rent adjustments. It's an adjustment to your Section 8 contract rent. There are 4 kinds of these adjustments, and they occur every year. They're processed by the contract administrator, which is us. They're not mandatory, so you're not required to accept an increase in rents. Most projects are eligible, so we will talk a little bit about that eligibility a little later on. So we're going to move on and discuss briefly the 4 types of adjustments. The first one is going to be an auto OCAF increase. This is operating cost adjustment factor. This is the most common type of rent adjustment. The rents are adjusted by the published OCAF. HUD publishes this factor every year. This year, that number is 3%. So it's a pretty decent increase. It's higher than last year. We at KHRC are going to prepare your rent adjustment assuming that you will select the OCAF because it is the most common. Another type of adjustment is really no adjustment at all. So your contract rents are going to remain the same as they have been for the upcoming year. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. That's probably the least common that we see. Third, you can have your rents adjusted by the market. Now, the times where this a rent adjustment takes place is really because the HAP contract that a property has requires this RCS, and so there's really not a choice. At the first year of a new RCS, we will adjust those rents by the market. This isn't necessarily a selection that you will make. Lastly is the budget-based rent adjustment. So this is another type of adjustment to your rents where if you feel that OCAF increase is not enough to really sufficient to successfully operate and maintain your property, you can request a rent adjustment based on your expenses. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. We're going to recap a little bit, like I said, of part one. And if you think of this as a game of tag, it helps kind of put all of these pieces together. There's a lot going on, a lot of back and forth, a lot of communication. And so we're going to talk about this like tag. So the first thing that happens, as we discussed last time, is that we'll send you a letter, and this begins that process. You are then going to complete the rent adjustment documents, rent adjustment checklist, property contact form, and upload all that to Procorem. And this is what we discussed in part one. We are going to review that information, verify the information that we need to, reach out if more information is needed or we need to get a little bit more clarification. We're also going to prepare your OCAF increase documents. And then 150 days before your property's effective date, we will upload 3 documents to Procorem. And so these 3 documents is where we left off last time, so that to be continued slide. So that's going to be the bulk of what we talk about. So we'll move on. So we've uploaded those documents to Procorem and tag your it now. We will have the Cert for SIG, RFORR for SIG, and RS for SIG. We're going to talk about exactly what those mean here shortly. When we upload these documents to you, we will also set a task, and you have 10 days to review, complete, and return them to us. One thing I want to mention is that we know you get a lot of Procorem emails. We get a lot of Procorem emails. They're very important, these emails, and annoying, and we understand that, but please still watch each Procorem email because we don't want you to miss anything like this. This tells you that something's going on, something you have to do. We got action required. Okay, a little bit of recap from where we left off, so I'll stop for just a second and see if there's any initial questions.
We don't have any questions, but I will tell everybody that I just got the link to the first recording of the rent adjustment part 1 this morning, and that means it's probably going to be on our publicized on our website by the weekend, so probably tomorrow afternoon. So if anyone, I know a couple people have reached out for the specific link. So yes, if after this training you want to get access to it before it's on our website, I do have the link to that now, so we'll share that.
Okay.
But
perfect.
oh, sorry, we do have one question that popped up. Is this also for a TIC property, so a tax credit property? No, the tenant income certification, the tax credit, this is totally different. So this is just purely for those Section 8 contracts. Gwen, good question.
Okay, wonderful. Moving on. So I encourage you to ask questions. Definitely, there'll be some breaks here as we go along. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is a Cert for SIG. So this document actually includes several things. We call it a Cert for SIG, and it really is talking about the OCAF certification that we've prepared that we want you to review and ultimately sign and return. We have to send this to you 150 days before your effective date. So that's why you're getting it about that time. So like I said, this document includes several things, and one of those is an instruction page. This webinar, we're really going to go into those instruction pages. It also includes an OCAF selection page, an OCAF certification page, and then your Exhibit A with the OCAF adjusted contract rents. So we will talk about all of these as we go along. The instruction letter, so that's what we're going to talk about first. This is included in the document titled Cert for SIG. We have 3 different types of letters that you could possibly get. The first one here on your screen is what we refer to as a red light letter. This means that we didn't get all of the information that we needed from you by the 150-day mark. It also is going to tell you that you have to provide this missing information before signing the rent adjustment documents. And so there's going to be some back and forth. Our staff will reach out and you'll know what's missing. There'll be some, communication. We'll set we'll post and set tasks related to that missing information. Once we receive all that required information that was missing originally, we will upload to you a revised Cert for SIG and a revised rent schedule for SIG. The second letter that you could get is what we refer to as the yellow light letter. So you're almost there. It still indicates that not all information was received by this 150-day mark. However, you still must review, sign, and upload those rent adjustment documents that are included. The difference here is that once we received your signed documents, we're going to hold execution, meaning we're not going to give you back your rent schedule fully executed until we receive the final piece of information that we need. Some examples of those things include a SAM registration. So SAM, as I think a lot of you know, can be difficult and can cause delays. 2530s can also cause delays as well. The third instruction letter that you could get is our green light letter. So this one is what you want. This is the letter that you want to see. This means that all required rent adjustment documents were received on time and that this process can continue. And so this webinar is going to discuss the steps addressed in this letter. So it's got everything that you need to do, and we're going to talk about each one of those things as we go. All right, so we're going to get a little further into the Cert for SIG document. So you've got the instruction page in the beginning. So next is going to be the actual auto OCAF letter. And this is a letter, it's a 3-page letter that's generated from the HUD Secure system. It includes information that we've received and processed in part 1. So all of those documents that you were completing, the checklist, we're looking at your debt service, all of those things, additional fees, all of those things are going to be included in this processing and ultimately reflected on this auto OCAF letter. So you're going to review and make a rent adjustment selection on this document. This is where you're going to tell us exactly what you want for your rent adjustment. It's your formal rent adjustment request. Okay, this section of this OCAF certification is probably one of the most important parts and where we see the most errors. So keep in mind, as I'm talking these next several slides, I'm going to be talking about those properties that want to take an OCAF increase. So we will discuss the other types of adjustments later on. So everything kind of from here going on is related to an OCAF increase. This is the middle section of that letter that you're going to get. Lots of boxes. And this is where you're going to make your selection. I want you to only pay attention to the first 2 boxes here in this black outline. The first one, you're going to select if you want the automatic OCAF increase and your property does not have a utility allowance. The second box is almost the same thing. You are telling us you want the OCAF increase, but your property does have a utility allowance. Now it's confusing and I completely understand why. So this document states that you're going to be submitting that UA to us and supporting documentation is enclosed. We understand that that's not the case. We process that ahead of this. So all of that should have already been taken care of and processed. So at this point in time, this box, you're only selecting it if your property has a utility allowance. The first box is for properties who do not have a utility allowance. And like I said, this is where the most errors occur. We always review when we get this sent back to us to make sure that that right box was selected. And we can't make that change for you. So I'm sure some of you have experienced us returning something to you and say the wrong box is checked. This is it right here. The other boxes right now don't apply. These do not request an OCAF increase. Okay, moving on. So the next page of this OCAF certification letter is the certification portion. So here you are certifying to the amount of debt service and non-contract or non-Section 8 rent potential that was used in the calculation. And so this line up here, for example, in this example, this $48,000 is the amount of debt service that we used when we calculated this OCAF adjustment. And in this case, there was no non-Section 8 rent potential, so that number is 0. Property owner needs to print out the project name, the owner name, sign it, and date it. Make sure you date every document that you sign. And so this is you telling us, yes, this is correct. And the selection before that was telling us that you want the increase. The last page of that auto certification letter, auto OCAF certification letter, is an Exhibit A. This Exhibit A identifies all of your contract rents, the bedroom sizes, if there's a utility allowance associated with that bedroom size. The Exhibit A acts as an amendment to your HAB contract. Every one of you has a HAB contract with an Exhibit A. And at every rent adjustment, you will get a new Exhibit A, and that looks like this. And that Exhibit A is going to replace the previous one. You need to keep this for your records. You know, when you receive this, you want to make sure that you're looking to make sure rents are correct. There's nothing that looks unusual. And I guess that was the end of that. Are there any questions about that Cert for SIG document? So it includes an instruction letter, it includes the auto OCAF letter, and your Exhibit A. Any questions about that?
I'm going to wait for just 2 more seconds because we don't have any, but
That's okay.
I'm going to see if any pop up here in a second.
We can keep going, and if there are questions, we can address those at the next break if you want, Jackie.
Sure. We actually just had one pop up. John actually got a couple just pop up, which I knew was going to happen. So John has more of a recommendation than a question, and it says, when signing, I recommend always entering your title, which you for sure can do that. Sarah and the rest of the team are going to confirm that the person who signed is an approved owner on the 2530. So definitely a good suggestion, but we're going to double check to make sure anyway. And then actually, speaking of the 2530, we had another question. Can you explain a little bit more on the 2530?
Yes, I will. I say a little bit right now, and then I do have a slide later on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the 2530 is it's called previous participation. It's a HUD form that you have to list any changes that take place within the management or ownership of the project. And so anytime there's a change in any players, you would want to submit a new 2530, and that's done through a system called APPS. Don't ask me what it stands for because I don't remember. It's a HUD system, and unfortunately, the contract administrator does not have access to that system, so we can't get in and see the status of your submission. So I suggest that if you are needing to make changes to, or changes have happened and you need to submit a new 2530, I would reach out to your HUD account executive. If you don't know who that is, please let us know. We'd be happy to look it up for you. And then just communicate with them and let them know exactly what type of change this is, and they should be able to help you navigate that app system. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Hopefully that answered a little bit of that question. Any follow-up to that?
Actually, yes. We have a couple of HUD staff on here who gave us a heads up. APP system stands for Active Partners Performance System.
Okay, there you go. There you have it. There's a million of these acronyms, and I know a good portion of them, but I certainly don't know all of them. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Yep, thank you.
Okay, any other ones, Jackie?
Oh, nope, sorry, we're good.
Okay. All right, so next, the rent schedule. RS for SIG is rent schedule for signature, or for the owner's review and signature. So we'd like to shorten these. So this is what that means, just like the Cert for SIG. So the rent schedule is prepared by the finance staff here, and it's in conjunction with your rent adjustment. So as we're processing and reviewing and looking at all your documents, we are creating your rent schedule at the same time. The new rents from this adjustment, remember, don't go into effect until the effective date listed on that rent schedule. It will always be the first of the month. And so if you have an anniversary date of May, then your rents will go into effect May 1st each year after that. The rent schedule should be made available to your tenants upon request. And then you need to review all parts of the rent schedule. So this document includes a lot of information about your property. We want to make sure it's accurate. So if you are looking at it and you do find maybe a typo or an error or something that's just not right, please let us know, and you can do that by making a post in the Work Center. Okay, we're going to break down this rent schedule. I'm not going to spend a ton of time. There's several parts. I think there's 9 parts in all on this rent schedule. So this is one of the reasons why I had you all pull up your current rent schedule for your property so you can follow along here. The first part is the rents. This is pretty important, probably one of the most important pieces that you're going to want to make sure is accurate. This is what we're doing behind the scenes, is adjusting your rents and including that on a rent schedule. So it's going to give you the contract rents, your type of floor plan, OCAF adjusted rents, utility allowance, if your property has one. In this example, there is not one, but if there was, it would be listed in this column. If you have any non-contract units at your property, the number of units and the rent will also be listed. And then down here is going to show you your total number of units. And then you're going to have also your monthly contract rent potential and yearly contract rent potential over here. Very important that you look at this. We are all human, and so sometimes mistakes happen, and we do our very best to ensure that they don't happen, but we want to encourage you to review every document that we send to you because we want it to be accurate. So that's part A. Part B includes several things. This is all of the items that are included in that rent. So that rent that we just listed and you reviewed and we adjusted, what are the tenants getting when they pay that rent? So 3 sections. We've got equipment, furnishings, utilities, and then services and facilities. So we look at your last rent schedule and we mirror that when we're creating the rent schedule for this year, and won't make any changes unless we've been informed. So if there has been something on here that isn't right, it could potentially get carried over from year to year. So that's why we really want you to take a close look at this area and let us know if any of this information is not correct. Okay, part C and D. Part C are going to be those charges in addition to rent. So unlike the section before, this is going to list everything that the tenants are going to have to pay separately. Of course, these are all optional. These can't be mandatory charges. Most common we see cable fees, extra parking. Honestly, I can't remember. Cable is probably the most common thing that we see down here. So you'll want to make sure that that looks accurate as well. And then your non-revenue producing space. So details regarding the non-revenue units. If you have units at your property that are not producing revenue, for example, an office or an employee unit, this section down here is going to give that summary. So make sure that this is accurate. And this is information that you're providing to us on that rent adjustment checklist from part 1. Actually, most of this is. Part E is commercial space. This is very uncommon. I think maybe we have just 1 or 2 properties that have information in this commercial space. So if you have a question about that or unsure, reach out later. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. Okay, part F is your maximum allowable rent potential. So that's what we're doing when we're calculating your rents, is we're giving you this maximum allowable rent potential. So this number is your I think it's the monthly rent potential that we saw in part A, and the property owner cannot collect more than that amount of money per month. That's your maximum. And this maximum allowable rent potential equals your authorized rents, which are also listed in part A. Okay, so now we move on to the second page. The first part of part G will be pre-filled for you. In this example, it's not really, it just says property owner, but we will pre-fill this for you with the owner of this property name right here. We're also going to pre-fill the type of entity. And so this information we're getting from the HUD Secure system or from the property contact form that you've completed and submitted. So make sure we have that entered correctly. And then right below that, you're going to enter, you're going to either write out, type, whatever you need to, name and title of the members of that ownership entity. So just the name and title is all you need, and the rent schedule, actually there's several spaces here below. So this example, there's only 4, but that back page of your rent schedule, if you're looking at it, needs to be completed with all members of the ownership. All right, towards the bottom, this is where you're going to sign. After you've looked at all of those parts, everything looks great, you're going to certify and sign to the accuracy of this rent schedule. So you need to print your name and your title, and then you're going to sign it. One of the most common mistakes we see is that it's signed but not dated. And so we can't date it for you, which means we have to send it back, which means then you have to download it, open it, date it, send it back to us. It's just kind of annoying, actually. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware dates need to be included anytime you sign a document. The very bottom part of the rent schedule, part I, is for us. So it will have your contract number listed here, and then our finance officers will sign. In this example, we've got Liz here, and then after everything's been completed, then I sign it. So a fully executed rent schedule should have 2 signatures from Kansas Housing. Okay, questions? We're going to talk about the RFORR next.
I don't have any questions yet. I assume we'll probably get some of definitely about the RFORR letter. That's somewhat newish. But no questions so far. So if any come up, we'll get to the next spot. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. All right, RFORR, what is this thing? This is probably one of the most confusing things. So we're sorry about that. So hopefully this is going to break it down for you a little bit. It's really not hard. RFORR is going to stand for Reserve for Replacement for the Owner's Signature. This is an account. It's a banking account that's monitored by HUD, and it's used by the owner for replacement expenses at your project. If you have a Reserve for Replacement account held by HUD, you most likely know that. The monthly deposit amount is adjusted by your HUD account executive in conjunction with the annual rent adjustment. It's not adjusted the same way as your rents are, which is one of the reasons that KHRC does not adjust that deposit amount. Not all projects are required to have this HUD-held RFORR account, but we're required to send the certification to all of you. So I know that this is fairly new. I can't remember, in the last 6 months, maybe, Jackie, we started to send this letter out, and the letter itself has changed, quite a bit. So if you manage properties with multiple rent adjustment effective dates, you've probably seen a couple variations of this letter. Ultimately, what you need to do, if you have a required RFORR account, like I mentioned, that monthly deposit is going to increase. So you have to sign the document acknowledging that, and that you're going to contact your HUD account executive for details. So they will be the ones that tell you how much it's increasing, answer any questions you have about that account. We just need to make sure that you are aware and acknowledge that you will contact them. If you do not have an RFORR account, sign the appropriate line, and nothing else is needed. Now, actually, I take that back. You do have to upload this document to us, but nothing else needs to happen after that. So this bottom section is where you would sign if you do not have one of those accounts. Now, I know a lot of you are probably unsure if you have one of these. And if that's the case, ask us. We will be happy to help look that up for you. I do suggest also reaching out to your HUD account executive, because they can tell you for sure. And if you don't know who that is, again, we'd be happy to provide you with that name. That's all I have on the Reserve for Replacement certification. So I know that we have gotten a lot of questions in the past about this. So I'll stop here and see if there's any other questions about the Reserve for Replacement, or the Cert for SIG, or the rent schedule for SIG.
We haven't popped up any yet, but while we're waiting, I'll probably piggyback on what Sarah was saying. I think some of the confusion is that with this Reserve for Replacement certification is that a lot of owners opt into having their own replacement reserve account. It's a good practice to have when you're owning a affordable housing project. And a lot of properties that are also Section 8 might have layered tax credits on top, which maybe the syndicator also requires a reserve for replacement account. And so where we see a lot of error is because the ownership is required to have a reserve for replacement, because of the tax credit program, or a home program, or a housing trust fund, or a syndicator. They're assuming that that is a HUD monitored reserve for replacement account. That's not always the case. So that's another good reason to reach out to us or to your HUD account executive to see if it's an actual HUD required reserve for replacement account. You might have one, but it may not be a HUD requirement. So that's the only thing I'll reiterate there, but no questions yet. So we're good.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So we will move on. And next we're going to talk about how to submit this rent adjustment request to us. Whoops, let's get this. Okay, hold on. Sorry, I'm frozen a little bit. Not sure why that won't switch slides. There we go. Okay, so submitting your OCAF increase request. Know your due date. So this date is set on the task that we create when we first upload these 3 documents to your work center. Know that date. That's why I was saying these Procorem emails are very important, because they're going to tell you what we've uploaded, what you need to do, when the due dates are for you to return information. So know that date. You're going to make sure that all 3 documents have been reviewed, signed, and dated. Those 3 documents were the Cert for SIG, RS for SIG, and RFORR. So your OCAF certification, your rent schedule, and your reserve for replacement certification. Label all your files correctly. The next screen I'm going to show you again our file naming matrix. And so everything follows the same format when uploading to Procorem. And then you're going to upload it by the due date. So one thing I do want to make note of is that we give you 10 days. Once we upload these documents, we give you 10 days to review, sign, and return. And we recognize that sometimes it can be difficult, as we know that, probably most of the folks on here are from the management. And so you have to then reach out to the owner, wherever they may be, to get their signatures. So sometimes that can take a little time. We understand that. All we need you to do is make a post in Procorem. Let us know. We need a few extra days. We're having trouble getting, the owner to get this signed in 10 days. Not a problem. Just let us know that. That way we don't bug you after that due date comes and goes. And we can adjust the task if needed. Okay, and so that file naming, file naming matrix is here. So every document that you upload to Procorem should follow this format. So PBCA, your property name, the month, day, and year, which is going to be the upload date, whatever the document is. So for example, the documents that you're going to be uploading back to us will be executed Cert, executed rent schedule, and executed RFORR. Executed just means there's been signed. Those are the 3 documents that you'll be uploading to us. The next few slides are going to go through Procorem, and these are slides that I had in the last webinar. So I may go a little quickly through these, but I'm always happy to reach out or to have any of you reach out later, and I can go through navigating Procorem a little bit more slowly in more detail. So when you upload to Procorem, log in, you're going to find your project and enter the work center, and then you're going to click Files. From there, find Rent Adjustment, the folder for rent adjustments. From there, you're going to find your current year's rent adjustment folder. So as you're in Procorem, you should see several folders with several different years. So every document related to, in this example, the 6/1/22 rent adjustment is going to be in this folder. All right, then from there, you're going to click Upload right here. You will go find your executed Cert, rent schedule, and RFORR from your computer. You will either drag and drop it or select it, whatever you do. You can enter a comment if you'd like to. Comments show up on the email notification. So we use comments in just about every upload so that you have an idea of what that is when you see the email. It's not necessary, not required. If you want to, go ahead and put a comment in. And then you're going to upload. One thing, I'm not sure if I mentioned this last month or not. So when you are uploading documents to Procorem, please follow the steps that I just went through. Go to the files, go to upload, and do it that way. We have some files that get actually attached to a post in Procorem, and it's very difficult to track track that document because we have to move it to the appropriate folder. Oftentimes they can get missed. So please avoid including attachments when you create a post in Procorem. And I know that if you replied to these Procorem emails, you can attach a document that way. Please don't do that. Just follow the steps that I just went over. Marking off the task, this is the same from last month as well. So anytime you upload a document, more than likely there's going to be a task associated with it. So hover over that green check mark or that check mark until it turns green, click it, and you're done. If you don't do that, you're going to continue to get reminder emails and then ultimately an overdue reminder if your due date has passed. Okay, tag, we're it again. You've uploaded your documents to us. They've been reviewed and signed and uploaded. It's our turn. So what we are going to do when we receive those documents from you is we're going to check the signer's name against the 2530, the HUD Secure System, and the property contact form that you submitted to us. So very important when you are obtaining signatures for these documents that they are from a member of the ownership on that 2530. If they're not, we will reach back out to you and ask you to get a signature for someone who is. And so let's say, for example, you got a signature, they're not on the 2530, but they should be. So you can certainly submit that change to your 2530. You can send us a copy and we can kind of tell you what we can do from there. That's what we're doing. We're checking that signer's name against all of those things. So that's one of the reasons we want that property contact form from you. HUD Secure Systems is not always reflected or reflective of the most current information. So that's why we rely real heavily on these 2530s. Okay, make sure all documents are dated. Like I said earlier, that's pretty common, is to leave off that date. And you don't want to have to get an email from us that says, okay, all we're missing is a date. It's just kind of annoying. Verify your selection. So we're going to look and see which box did you select. So as I talked about earlier, those two boxes that indicate the increase is wanted, but it depends on the UA requirement, which one you select. We're going to look and make sure you've selected the correct one. We're then going to complete the processing and we will request funding for this upcoming year. And so every year, part of these annual rent adjustments is to request funding so you continue to get your HAP payments. If these are delayed for whatever reason, we can't request funding. And so it is possible that at some point you could have a HAP payment delayed. So one of the reasons why we want to make sure this is done timely, and one of the reasons why we work on this so far in advance. Lastly, we will send your fully executed rent schedule to EPS. So I don't know if you know, your management practice is to also do that, and honestly, I don't. I'm not familiar with the software enough to know, but just know that our staff will send that executed rent schedule to EPS. Okay, so the fully executed OCAF rent adjustments. Here we go. After we have, let's go back one more slide. After we've done all of this stuff, because it's our turn, we are going to upload that fully executed rent adjustment to the work center. So these are the three documents that you'll get. You'll get the executed rent schedule. This is the fully executed rent schedule signed by you and by two of our KHRC staff. Second, you're going to get this document called Execute to Owner. That's just how we label it. It's a letter. It's a very simple letter stating that this process has been completed. Last, you're going to get a copy of that reserve for replacement that you signed. And this is just for your records. Nothing has changed. We just include it back into the package that we send you. Okay. One more tag, and that's you. So once you get your fully executed rent adjustment package, there's going to be a few things that you'll want to do. You're going to implement your gross rent change at the appropriate time. You can post the rent schedule for your tenants or have it available to them upon request. Pay attention to Procorem for important emails throughout the next year. Even though your rent adjustment is done, doesn't mean that there won't be anything else that comes through in Procorem. So it could be a tenant concern, a special claim, an MOR. So it's still important to pay attention to those Procorem emails. And then you're going to wait for next year till you get the 210 letter and start all over again. So every year this will happen. Okay. Questions at this point. I will be talking briefly about the no adjustment to rents, a budget-based rent adjustment, and then when rents are adjusted by the market. Hopefully I'm doing okay on time.
I think so, because everyone is radio silent and I don't have any questions. I feel like I need to like send a pop quiz out to the audience and ask them a question.
I like questions. So this is your time. Ask questions. I love answering questions. I ask a lot of questions myself. But if you don't have any, that's okay. Maybe they'll come up later. And if that's the case, we are here for questions. 100%. If you've got a question about how to do something, because this stuff is a lot. And this is just one piece of having a property with a HUB contract. So we're here to help you navigate this complicated HUD world. So don't ever hesitate to ask questions. But if there are none right now, Jackie, I will keep going.
I just got one pop up, and it's a good one. But so John asked, will you have a session on special claims? We have had one on special claims. So I think that was our second training. I think utility allowances was first and special claims was second. We started this back in June, so maybe August, September was our special claim. But not to fear, on our website, if you go to kshousingcorp.org and click on the Section 8 contract administration link, about halfway through the page, there's a link that says, training videos, and you can click on that, and it should have utility allowances, special claims, and then it'll have this run adjustment part 1 here on in a second. We'll put run adjustment part 2 on. I'm missing one. We did another training. Special claims.
Special claims, run adjustments part 1, run adjustments part 2. This is number 4.
Okay, that's right. So yeah, we did do that one already. And I guess I do have a question for the audience, just curiosity wise. I know we're talking about just taking the OCAF, and I know there's UAs and that could increase or decrease, or RCSs, or what is the if I can ask, what is the most time consuming task? When you're preparing to process your annual run adjustment, what takes management the most time for management to complete that we can maybe help the process? Utility allowance, yeah. Utility allowance for sure, especially if a baseline is due. A factor obviously is UA gathering. Okay, utility allowance. We gave that training first because every Section 8 property is required to do utility allowance on every 3rd year, and we're a majority of our portfolio that we're processing rent adjustments for are in the middle of their 3rd year. So if you didn't get a chance, definitely watch that utility allowance. We got some best practices in there, and then just ways to expedite that a little bit. But I agree, utility allowance, it seems to always be the thing that holds up executing these.
Yeah, so and if you know you have one coming up, don't wait. Don't procrastinate on those, because they could potentially take a lot of time, because you're waiting on a lot of different people and things. So your tenants have to sign something, you have to ask the utility company for that information, and some of them are real quick and they give you that information immediately, and some do not. You have to continue to follow up, or there's some kind of delay for whatever reason. Then you got to send it to us, and we're going to look at it and probably ask questions. So it is a lengthy process. So if you know you have a baseline that's due soon, get started on that immediately. And the first thing you should do is collect your tenant release forms.
Yeah.
For sure. Anything else, Jackie, before we move on?
Yeah, we had one more question, which is a good one, and I think we go over this more. We went over this more in part 1, but just as a recap, can you please explain what the 210 letter is?
So yes, that was included in part 1. So the 210 letter is a letter that we send to you 210 days before your property's rent adjustment effective date. That letter is going to tell you everything that you need to do in order for us to process your rent adjustment. So it's going to give you due dates, it's going to give you documents to complete, it's going to give you dates that your last baseline was completed and tell you whether or not you have a new one that's due. It'll tell you if you have an RCS that's due this year. That letter is very important. So if you have, if you see a 210 letter come across, jump on that because that's important. It's time. It's time to start this process. And we send those letters out usually the first week of every month. So depending on what your effective date is for your property, those letters are sent out every month, and it's usually within the first week-ish of the month that we send those out. Anything else?
Yeah, we have one more good question. How far ahead of time can utility release forms from tenants be signed? Which is a good question. We go over that.
You can get the tenant release form signed at any time. So, right, Jackie, like I would suggest putting into place some kind of practice where that is part of the annual certification process, is you make sure that you have a tenant release form on file for utilities. That way, you'll never have to wait for that. You'll just have it, and then you'll make your request and send. Now, there are time, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but when you're submitting those utility requests to us, you can't send it to us before 180 days before your effective date. But those tenant release forms, get them now. Get them yesterday. Get them tomorrow. Yep.
Yeah, one of the best practices that we talk about in the utility allowance training is just having that part of your annual rent or your annual with the tenant is that part of their package, is have them re-sign those. Well, we have a bunch of comments now. This has sparked some questions. Please warn people about the scam companies that charge for SAM renewals. SAM renewals also came up as another one that takes some time. You know, and we definitely see some delays because of SAM renewals. That has to be done every year. The only time we see a lot of issues, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, is if there's a change, like there's a change to the ownership or partners associated with it. So make sure you have something set on your calendar or whatever you set to remind you to just update that every year. And there are companies that apparently that charge for SAM renewals, and don't do that. You should be able to go in there pretty easily and take care of that yourself. And then I think this is regarding the utility allowance. So for the owner agents, we struggle with tenants who sign the releases, but when they go to the utility company, they are in another person's name, like a parent's name if a child lives at the property. So that would definitely be a struggle. And
and maybe that just needs to be a question that's asked every time when you get those release forms signed, and have them tell you whose name is this utility in.
Yeah.
And then it'll, hopefully you can take care of that. So sooner than later. Anything else?
Yeah, sorry, here we go.
Okay.
This is a good one too. Please explain a little more about finding the current 2530 that must be submitted this year. I have not tried Secure Systems, and we'll try that. Thank you. So Tani, we might reach out to you. I'll respond back in the chat about the 2530. You probably have one on file if you're managing the property, but it's usually when there's a change of some sort that you have to go into the app system and do that. So Tani, I got your question. We'll reach out to you to talk more about that, about finding where your 2530s are for both ownership and management.
And you can also, if you're fairly new, or even if you're not fairly new, it doesn't really matter. If you need a copy of that last approved 2530, so you know what's existing now, we're happy to send that to you. We have almost all of those on file. And if we can't or don't have it, then HUD can absolutely send that to you. So reach out to us if you need a copy of the last one that for that property. We can provide that. If we don't have it, then we would go and ask your account executive. Okay.
Okay. Yep. Thank you very much, guys. That's all I've got right now.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so let me get back to this. Okay. All right. So we have gone through really the whole OCAF adjustment process. So like I mentioned in the beginning, there are a few other types of adjustments that can be made. So we're going to touch on those, and I'm not going to go into as much detail. So the next several slides, really the last half of this webinar, if you have questions, definitely ask. But if they are questions that really we need to dive in a little bit deeper and answer in more length, we'll probably reach out later. And I imagine that there'll probably be some questions about the budget and the RCS. So I'll try to address as much as I can here. So we'll talk about the first one, which is really no adjustment at all. And this is when you do not want the OCAF increase and you want your rents to stay the same as they were previously. So like I mentioned, most properties are eligible for this increase, but it is not mandatory. So you don't have to take the increase. Instead, you can request to keep your rents at their current levels. So a couple things to keep in mind. All the steps outlined in part 1 of the training webinar still apply. You still have to provide us all of the information. So if you're due for a utility baseline, or you need to complete the rent adjustment checklist and the property contact form and all of that information, you still need to send to us. We are still going to prepare your rent adjustment, assuming that you want the OCAF. So we will adjust the rents and send you a rent schedule reflecting those OCAF adjusted rents. And so these 3 documents that we talked about earlier, you're still going to get these. The difference is that when you make your selection, you're going to select this 3rd box right here. So it's pretty lengthy. It essentially says, well, we'll read it. I request a 0 budget-based rent adjustment in lieu of the OCAF adjustment, and understand that this will result in renewed funding at current rents. So it goes to talk a little bit further that if you make this selection and want to stay at your current rent levels, you will never be able to recoup that OCAF adjustment that you're passing up on. Now, next year you can take an OCAF if you want, but you can never go back and recoup that money. And then by signing the certification, which you still have to do, you are not only certifying to how we had previously prepared that OCAF, but that you have reviewed the project's income and expenses, and that they are at levels that will enable me to continue to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing. So one of the nice things about these HAP contracts is that HUD will increase these contract rents every year because things increase every year. That's just what happens. It costs more to operate, costs more to maintain. And so these OCAF adjustments are to help adjust for that. So if a property doesn't want to increase your rents, you have to be 100% certain that you can maintain your property at those current levels. Okay, so what do you do after that? So the rent schedule, you're still going to review that for accuracy, but you can ignore those contract rents because we're going to revise that. If errors are present, let us know. Don't sign and don't return. The OCAF certification, we just talked about that one. You're going to print, sign, and date. And then we want you to create a post and let us know the reason why you're choosing not to accept that increase. So the reason we ask for you to tell us why is because we've had in the past some properties who have not accepted the OCAF, but didn't really understand what was happening. And so years later, they found themselves in a situation where their rents are just not high enough to cover the operating and maintenance expenses. And so we want to make sure that you know and everybody's set, and so no financial distress will take place if you don't choose that increase. So let us know why. And then you're going to upload that document by the due date, and your reserve for replacement, sign and date it, and upload it by the due date. And back to tag. So we're it again. So once we get those documents from you, it's going to be very similar to what we are doing when you select the OCAF. We're going to check your name or whoever signed it, make sure everything is dated. We're going to verify your selection. So if you don't tell us why you want to stay at rent levels, we will post and ask you. We're going to revise your rent schedule to reflect current rents. So the rent schedule that you got with your Cert for SIG is the OCAF adjusted rents. Throw that in the trash because we will update it and provide a new one for you. And then you're it. You're going to review, sign, and return, and then we're it. And we will complete that process and execute your rent schedule. Okay, so I don't have a question screen in here, but I'll take just a second if there's any questions when you do not want an increase to your contract rent. I'm going to talk about budget-based rent adjustments next. Jackie, any questions?
Nope, we don't see it very often, so I don't have any questions.
Yep, this is the least common. It's not really encouraged, but wanted to mention it. We do see it sometimes. Okay, next, we're going to talk about a budget-based rent adjustment. So these are becoming a little bit more frequent, and this is an adjustment to your contract rent. And it's for property owners who feel that that OCAF rent increase is not enough to successfully operate and maintain your project. So you can request us to adjust your rents based on your project expenses. This process is a lot. So we'll talk about a little bit of that process. So if you're considering, and BBRA is a budget-based rent adjustment, we encourage you to contact us as soon as possible. So if you're just thinking about it, give us a call or post in the work center and say, hey, we would like to set up a call to talk about a budget. There's a lot involved, a lot of pieces, and we want to make sure we're all on the same page and that you know exactly what to expect if this is the option that you choose. We will still collect your rent adjustment documents and prepare an OCAF adjustment for your review. So this is the same. You're still going to complete everything, turn it into us. We're still going to give you back a Cert for SIG, rent schedule for SIG, and RFORR for SIG. The difference is that when you get that document, the selection will change. So back to the selection page is I request a budget-based rent increase for the upcoming contract year. The required documentation for this increase is enclosed, and if applicable, you're submitting a UA. Now, the required documentation for this rent increase is enclosed. This is really how this process should work. You should get the Cert, check the box, send it back to us along with all of the required documentation for a budget. However, sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's okay. That's why we want you to contact us early on. If you're thinking about doing a budget, let us know. We will walk through the whole process and what that looks like, because it's going to take you some time to collect everything that's needed. And I'm going to show you a screen here in a minute with a long list of items that you'll have to provide. So I can't stress that enough. If you're thinking about a budget, reach out to us as soon as possible. But once you've decided that this is what you want to do, this is your formal request. So you'll mark that box. You're still going to have to certify and sign, and I don't have a screenshot of the signature page, but you'll still certify and print, sign, and date. Okay, from there, what do? The rent schedule. Review for accuracy. Ignore the rents because those are not going to go into effect. But we do want to know if there's any other errors on that. Let us know if there are. Don't sign, don't return. OCAF certification, we just talked about that. Print, sign, and date. Upload it to Procorem by the due date. RFORR, disregard that because that's going to be a piece that we talk about as we're processing your budget. And then you're going to prepare additional budget documents and submit an RCS. So if you're ready at the time that you are making the selection, upload it to Procorem along with that Cert for SIG. If you're not ready, contact us and we'll talk you through that process. So if maybe you weren't sure that you wanted this until we sent you this and you're like, oh, that OCAF is that's just not going to do it. I think we need to do a budget. Okay, give us a call. We'll talk you through that process and then we can move forward. Okay, here's that long list. This is quite a few things. It's not 100% everything that will be needed, but it encompasses quite a bit. So I don't know if I'll read all of these or not. The biggest things that I want you to know of is that a rent comparability study is required for any budget-based rent adjustment request. So that is also an expense that you'll have to keep in mind. They're not cheap. I'm sure a lot of you have had to engage an appraiser for a rent comparability study. They are required for a budget. Some of the big things are we have to have a completed budget worksheet and explanation documentation for all of your expenses. 3 years of audited financial statements, And then some of these other things are just required to go along with it. So these are all things that we can talk through with you. This is a decently lengthy process. And at the end of the day, what will happen is that we will process your budget, and we're going to look at your budget and see what number that comes up with in rent. We're going to look at the RCS and see what that comes up with. We'll kind of compare that to the OCAF also. You're going to tell us what you would like to have in an increase in your rent based on your budget. And then we're going to compare all of these numbers. And if your budget comes in below the rent comparability study, then you'll be capped at the rent amount in your budget. So we can talk more about that. I don't want to go too much more into it right now. Just know that there's a lot included. Okay, last, and I will take questions here. And well, Jackie, are there any questions about the budget?
Nope, I don't have. Excuse me, I don't have any yet, but I know we have another spot at the very end.
Okay. All right, so then I'll keep moving on. This is the last rent adjustment type that we're going to talk about, and it's an adjustment by the market. So a rent comparability study. If a lot of you should know if you have a HAP contract that requires an RCS. And if you do, that RCS is good for 5 years. And then at the end of that life cycle, you're required to have a new RCS. And what happens at that point is you don't have a choice on how your rents are adjusted. They're going to be adjusted by the market. So you're not eligible for an OCAF increase if you are in that first year of the RCS. You will know when that RCS for your property expires and if you're required to have a new one on your 210 letter. So we had a question earlier about that 210 letter. It's very important. It gives you a lot of information. So if that 210 letter says you are required to have an RCS this year, the letter will also tell you that we're going to set your rents by the market. You don't get an OCAF increase. And the thing with this is that those rent comparability studies could come back and show market rents that are above your current levels. They could also show market rents that are below your current levels. So we haven't actually seen, I don't think I've seen that happen, but it could. So a couple of things that you'll want to do if you are due for a new RCS. You're going to engage an appraiser, schedule that study. So sometimes this is another thing that can cause some delays. The utility baseline is a lengthy process, and so can potentially this RCS process. So these appraisers, you'll have to engage one. If you need a list, let us know, and we'd be happy to provide you a list of appraisers. Engage them as soon as possible because it can take them up to like 45 to 60 days, even just to get out to the property, just depending on what's going on. Then they will prepare your RCS, and you will submit that to us. So submit the completed RCS to us via Procorem, and you have to do that between 180 and 120 days before your effective date. This is also stated on your 210 letter. We're going to review and approve that RCS. If there's issues with that, we will reach out, and then we'll prepare the rent adjustment. So we're going to give you a signature requested letter, and this is going to kind of replace that auto OCAF letter or that Cert for SIG. So properties with rents adjusted by the market will not receive a Cert for SIG. You will receive a signature requested letter, and in that letter, it's going to tell you what we've done. You'll get your rent schedule, the RFORR, and a new Exhibit A. From there, you will review, sign, and date the rent schedule and the RFORR, reserve for replacement letter, and upload both of those to Procorem. And then it's our turn. We're going to check your signer's name, make sure everything is dated, and then we'll complete that process and execute your rent schedule. That's all I've got on that rents adjusted by the market. So this is my last slide here. Summary of these types of adjustments. The OCAF rent increase is the most common. Ultimately, you as owner agents need to review, sign, and return all three of these documents: the Cert for SIG, rent schedule for SIG, and RFORR for SIG. I want to reference back to the first page of the Cert for SIG document includes instructions. Pay attention to which instruction letter you receive. If you got that green light letter, you're good to go. Otherwise, please read closely. If you're unsure or have questions, post, call, reach out to us, and we'll help you through that. For Those properties who don't want that OCAF increase, you're going to review, sign, and return the Cert and the RFORR. You're going to disregard the rent schedule because we're going to revise that for you. If your rents are going to be adjusted by the market, you're going to review, sign, and return the rent schedule and the RFORR. You will not even receive a Cert for SIG. And lastly, for budget-based rent adjustments, you're going to review, sign, and return that Cert for SIG with the budget selection and upload your additional required budget-based rent adjustment documents. We will then revise your rent schedule after we process your budget. And so that process can take some time. I feel like I rushed through that. If I did, I am sorry, but I'm happy to go return to any slide that we need to, or if there's something big that I've left out, let me know and be happy to go over it again. Or let's see, it's 11:05, so did pretty well on time. I'm hoping there's some questions, Jackie.
I do. I have one that's popped up just now.
Okay.
And it's a good question, as they all are. What is the status of the markup to market? Has HUD abandoned this? In the past, owners chose not to accept a rent increase because automatic increases exceeded market rents. HUD reduced rents, and this resulted in a disaster for many properties. They haven't abandoned the markup to market. I think this, Sarah, you go ahead and speak to this if you want, but is this, I think, John, maybe I need a little more.
Yeah, we might need to clarify a little bit about the question. So markup to market is really, we will talk about markup to market when we talk about contract renewals. And so, you know, all of these webinars I have mentioned your HAP contracts and the options that you have. And every HAP contract has a certain option, 1 through 5. Option 6 is our opt-outs. And so one of those options is to mark your rents up to market. And that occurs during a contract renewal, not during an annual rent adjustment. So I'm wondering if that might be what you're talking about with these RCS adjustments. That does not mean that if that, well, it doesn't mean that it's just going to automatic. Well, actually it does, now that I say that out loud. During your annual rent adjustment, if you have a RCS requirement, we'll set your rents to market. But they could go down, so that markup to market isn't really coming into play. That is for contract renewals, specifically under an option 1. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
That's what I assumed too. And that's, I guess, a good segue to just to kind of put in our next training will be on contract renewals.
Yes.
So I think maybe John's question refers to the markup to markup option 1A or B that we'll talk about.
Yes, yeah, and that is available for project owners who are renewing their contract. You know, assuming eligibility is met. So that's definitely what we'll talk about next time. And I think that's scheduled for sometime in February, maybe. I'm not even sure exactly when we have that, but so we're going to take a little bit of a break between these webinars, and we'll prepare a contract renewal webinar. And that will discuss a lot of things. Renewing your contract, what the options mean, requirements, you know, are different for each option. We'll touch on opt-outs, which is also an option. We'll touch on if properties want to terminate their contract and then renew versus waiting till the expiration of the existing contract. We'll talk about that. And if there's, of course, there's any questions about those things before the training, certainly reach out. Any other questions?
May give us good topics for the presentation. So yeah, I'm gonna give them a few more minutes because I haven't seen any else. I haven't seen any others pop up.
Okay.
We finished a little early.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know, sometimes that's kind of nice.
That's good.
This time of year, everything's really busy. So, you know, a 90-minute webinar, we reduced that by 20 minutes, not too bad. So yeah, I think you mentioned earlier, Jackie, we'll send out a certificate. Next training is going to be contract renewals. These are our finance officers and their contact information. So definitely reach out at any point in time to any one of us. You can do that via post. If you want to call or email, any of those are fine. This is complicated, lot to do, lot to know, lot to learn. So we're right there with you. And if we can't answer your question, we will find out how to do that. I think that's about all I have.
I think that's it. Awesome job, Sarah, as always. Thank you. And thanks everyone for your good questions and your time and attention today. Like Sarah mentioned, be on a lookout for information on registering for the next presentation, which is going to be on contract renewals, probably the end of February. We get through the holidays and start work on that next one. We are only planning to have 2 more. So after the contract renewal one in the end of February sometime, we'll probably do like a catch-all, kind of just some hot topic type things that we'll discuss a couple months after the contract renewal one is done. So I do want to let everyone know also that we did record this webinar, just like the others. So if you need to refer back to it, or know coworkers that were not able to, excuse me, attend the live session, the recording should be available on our website. It usually takes 10 to 14 days, but first one took a little bit longer than normal. So look out for that, and you can always reach out to us to get a link to our YouTube channel as well. The PowerPoint slides that Sarah created, unfortunately, will not be available, but so look for the recording on our website in a couple weeks. That is all. Thanks again. Have a fantastic rest of the week and happy holidays.